Hey, what's up, guys? Just a little overview of some of my favorite literature, this decadent literature, the fin de soleil, the yellow 90s. Much of your, to be frank, much of your horror, your modern horror, your weird tales, they come out of the stories of this movement. Of course, like most movements, it wasn't like a very organized thing. Most of them were French, but you had different writers in that vein. And of course, the starting point for all this is Edgar Allan Poe. Okay, and the whole idea of the late 19th century, the sense that these men, some of them were very proper men, some of them were very decadent men. Okay, they all saw in the end of the 19th century that what was coming was not. I keep saying it didn't look too good. Okay, the 19th century, the amount of changes that happened in the 19th century. The 20th century, we like to give a lot of attention to in terms of changes, but a lot of what happened, especially in the early 20th century, all was culminating in the 19th century. People, the traditions were literally ripped up. Industrialization, science, politics, all kinds of things of the bourgeoisization of the world, the power of the banks, okay, the rise of the nation state. You get all these historicist forces acting upon things, and whether you were a Marxist or whether you were a capitalist or whether you were whatever you want to think of, you thought that the future was bright, that progress was coming. Okay, the skyscrapers were starting to be built, air travel and balloons and photography and other things, electricity. You were starting to light. Most of the major metropolitan cities in the Western world were having electric lights. In the late 1800s, the streetcars. Okay, you had all these things. You had medicine, so much great. I mean, we were gonna go the heights that humanity, or at least our Western humanity, was gonna reach. The sky was the limit. But the writings of these men, sort of from different areas, all led to the same point that was not the case. Okay, and so that's why I have a lot of. There's so much. From this stuff as a historical point, as well as great literature, the sense of dread, the sense of uneasiness, the sense that the worst has already happened and now it's just going to be a slow decline. Okay, but there's also beauty in the decline, in the darkness. Okay, and in the world where God is dead. There's still opportunities, and there's still powers that man can tap into. So, anyway, most of these men were known for writing all kinds of different things. Obviously, Oscar Wilde needs no introduction. Dorian Gray was very influenced by Huysmans' Au revoir. There's a chapter in this that literally cribs from it. But the story itself is really, the corruption of this relatively innocent young man by many forces. What really drives him over the edge into the embrace of sin is when the young woman that he falls in love with essentially dies, and it changes him forever. And he has a painting made. Obviously, Basil makes a painting of him. And the more things he starts to do, the evil he does actually keeps him young looking, right? But obviously the painting starts to become grotesque, right? Sin after sin, and it really is this. The things he does, and it's very understated. There's a lot of things Oscar Wilde couldn't outright say, whether it was drug use or other behaviors, but it really is as good as they say. You see a lot of staging for things with this, and I would recommend it. It was originally published in a Philadelphia magazine, if you could believe that. The British version was a little more, I guess they changed some things in it, but you can get both versions. But even the regular version, it's fine. The point is made, let's say. So, King in Yellow, okay? Robert W. Chambers. Now, he was a New Yorker. He was from the old Brooklyn. He was from the Anglo-Saxon, upper class Brooklyn that existed, where my immigrant kind was confined to the downtown. And The King in Yellow is a collection of stories. Only the first 4 are connected in this King in Yellow, this thing that Lovecraft brings up as a very atmospheric story. They really are. Of course, the yellow sign is the one that everyone focuses on, and rightly so. The other one, the mask, is kind of cool. The In the Court of the Dragon is great, but the story that really strikes me here is the repair of reputations. And it's always, if it's ever mentioned by anybody, it's always like, oh, it's a dystopian view. Okay, all I have to say is read the first page of the Repair of Reputations, okay, of a alternate America of 1920. Okay, people think that some of the things he puts in, like the suicide chambers and this mysterious cult that Chambers puts in, shows that he would be against such a country, when really he's putting forth his vision of what America should and could have been, a more Prussian America. Okay, just read the first page. Okay, you'll see what I'm getting at. What I always thought of it was that the Repair of Reputations and the whole Yellow, King in Yellow stories deals with radicalism. Okay, he wrote stories later where he was very much against the radicalism in the country, all the anarchists and the communists and whatnot, and the idea that they were insane cults of these people that wanted to overthrow this country and make an imperial dynasty of America. It really is fascinating. In Poe is a huge thing, especially in that story. Edgar Allen Poe is all over it. It really is surreal and bizarre. And it takes place in Manhattan and Brooklyn of that time, a totally different world, than the one I grew up in. So it really is fascinating. It's really great. It actually, in some ways, might be, the Repair of Reputations might be the decadent horror story, or at least the top. It shares the crown with Arthur Machen's work. Okay, I'll get into that. 3 Imposters. Now, this is a collection. This is, of course, once again, Chaosium, right? I think their gaming site. But, of course, this is St. Joshi is all about this. And this reprints 3 Imposters, the complete 3 Imposters, and the Great God Pan, okay? And, of course, these other 2 stories here are decent. But I would argue, the Great God Pan and the 3 Imposters, along with the Repair of Reputations, are probably the 3 or the top stories of this decadent horror. They deal with decay. I mean, the King in Yellow. Yellow is decay. Okay, the King in Yellow, is some mysterious being. It's decadence. It's the decline. Okay, that's what the King in Yellow is, and that's what you see in these stories as well. The Great God Pan. Okay, now bringing this, of course, with Machen's background into the realm of paganism. Okay, the Great God Pan. We never know what it is, but you know what its manifestation in that young girl who becomes this seductive woman who goes on a rampage of love 'em and leave 'em dandy types who commit suicide after meeting her. Now, the 3 Imposters doesn't get a lot of notice. It's made up of a bunch of stories. The novel of the Black Seal, and the novel of the White Powder, I believe. Those are the stories that get reprinted a lot. Essentially, the stories in the 3 Imposters are told to the same 2 guys that you see. There's reoccurring characters, these 2 dandy types who kind of they don't really do anything. They just walk around and observe stuff. And the 3 Imposters is essentially told as it's like an anthology that's connected by a very strange story where everybody in the story is lying their asses off. You never even know if the stories they're telling, which are gruesome, and in some cases supernatural, you never know if these people are telling the truth or not. Okay, the 3 Imposters, who they say they are, you never really know. Okay, it's like the Repair of Reputations. You have an unreliable narrator, but like I said, these stories probably are the best in terms of the actual decadent horror. You could say that the King in Yellow and maybe these other books are there's analogies, but these are really supernatural, weird tales. And of course, this is why Poe valued himself. I already went over Henry James. The Turn of the Screw is one of the greatest, I would say, ghost stories, horror stories ever. It is totally written in a way different from these other stories. It's the opposite of florid. It actually goes the other direction. Okay, and also with the unreliable narrator taken to a huge extreme. I went over the Turn of the Screw. The Jolly Corner also is the other ghost story in this, which also fits into the themes of decadence. Mr. Henry James came back to New York and saw what I'm seeing now, all these huge buildings going up, and a sense of loss. Also seeing all these damn people from all over the world coming into his place and just making a racket, as Lovecraft would notice 20 years later. Okay, the decadence, the decline, when it seems to be on the cusp of the greatest achievements. Okay, the devil is there, smiling, and the little details that you didn't notice, the little fine print that's going to make a nightmare of your investment. So, like I keep saying with this, you know, Henry James, when he wrote ghost stories, and his earlier ghost stories too, the Ghostly Rental is really a kind of a cool story too. But focusing on this, The Turn of the Screw, 1898, is everything that they say it is. It's one of the greatest horror stories ever written. Okay? Now, George Karl Huysmans, I told you, Arbois is one of my favorite novels. Okay, and this is The Damned, right? La Paz. Now, he wrote this novel, and it's interesting. It goes back to some of the naturalism that he came out of. It's very journalistic, and it's very self-referential. This writer who is, he's researching the lives of Gilda Rays, right? Into Crypts of Rays. Remember the Celtic, the Celtic Frost song? Gilda Rays, the once protector of the Joan of Arc, who became a notorious, vicious, satanic, worshipping child murderer. And of course, this writer who's very jaded, who's basically this guy, is researching this while also investigating modern day devil worship in Fin de Soleil, Paris. The writing in this is really, it's amazing. He does, it seems journalistic, but he does a lot of that really beautiful kind of writing. And there's a real reverence in here. The same seeking that De Cesante sought in vain is also sought by the writer here. As jaded as he is, okay, he still has nothing for the bourgeois world, the materialist world, the Americanized world that is taking over Europe. And he looks into the old Catholicism, the mysticism, to find some kind of meaning, okay, both positive and the negative. I mean, I'm going to cover this. I'm going to cover this by itself. It's such a great book. But it really is the gruesomeness of some of the stuff that this son of a bitch, Gilda Rays, did will make you absolutely sick. And it makes it even crazier when you realize that this was serialized in a newspaper. Okay? And as scandalous as Huysmans' Arbois was, this thing, holy damn. And the story of his researching it, okay, there was this crazy ass woman that he met literally at an insane asylum inmate, in and out, basically taking him on all kinds of crazy adventures, and it really was. This is sort of like after this and after Arbois, he started to enter the world of becoming a Catholic lay monk, and these are his latest stories. I haven't read yet. Deal with that. Right? And just to top it off, I'm still reading this. This man, Jean Lorraine, right? Nightmares of an Ether Drinker, kind of like his short horror stories, which are really, surrealistic. He has another novel that came out later, Monsieur Foucault's, okay, which is sort of like the take on Dorian Gray, but cranked up to 11, okay, and really bizarre. Okay, Jean Lorraine was probably the most decadent, next to the Oscar Wilde, of these writers, and he suffered greatly for it. But a very underrated dude. I think his writing is brilliant and horrific. I'm actually going to do a reading of one of the stories, I think, because it really does convey that these men, okay, from different backgrounds, they saw What was coming in the modern materialist world was an empty shell, and they looked to anything to bring back the darkness of the old days. Later.